Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Bobby at Decoding, and this is the fourth video in the Hedera Hashgraph Python playlist that I'm knocking up here on YouTube. So if you've been following along, you'll know now that what I'm trying to do is stay ahead of the curve and help you as a Python developer use Hedera Hashgraph in your projects. And in this video, what we'll be doing, we'll be following the Hedera docs on the Hedera website and reading the SDK for Java, because there isn't one for Python just yet, and hopefully creating an account. But before I jump into it, if this is your first time visiting Decoding, then please subscribe to the channel and click the little bell so you're notified every time I add a video, which is normally 3 or 4 times a week. And also, if you look in the description, I've added my Hbar wallet. So if you're feeling generous, then ping me some Hbar, because it will help me create videos of a better quality, with any luck, and get them out there on YouTube at a bit of a faster pace, right? So that's got that out of the way. Let's jump straight into it. Look at my screen. It opens straight up on the Hedera or the docs.hedera.com website, and we'll be going through the next day. So if we look on the little list here, we're going through Java and we're creating an account. So we've already done the environment setup in the previous videos, linked to which is up here. We set up our machine. So we installed the JDK, we then set up a new virtual environment, and we went through the docs here to set up a client, because when you set up a client, it allows you to work with the SDK at Hedera. So in this one, we're going to create an account. So on that URL, which will be in the description below, we'll just go through this. So it's creating an account. In this section, you will learn how to make a simple Hedera account. Hedera accounts are the entry point by which you can interact with the Hedera APIs. Accounts can hold a balance of Hbar used to pay the API calls for the various transactions and query types. So that's what we'll be doing. So prerequisites: introduction, environment setup, which we've already done. We don't need to go through that. Accounts, core concepts, we've already done all of this. So if you want to get caught up, look at the other videos in the playlist, which is a link to which is at the top of the screen here. So step 1, we need to generate keys for the new account. So create keys for the new account you are going to create. The public key will be associated with the new account, and the corresponding private key is used to sign transactions. Continue building on the Hedera examples class from the previous section. See, we've already done this, so as in the previous section, so we can jump straight into this. Remember, this is a Java SDK. We're using we've pip installed a library that communicates with the Java SDK and allows us to code in Python whilst using the Java. So what we'll be doing is we'll be generating a new key pair, and then we'll be step 2, creating a new account. So we'll be using transaction response. We'll be using account create transaction, and we'll be using the exact same syntax as this, because if you remember in the library that we've installed, we're converting Java classes into Python classes, and it's the exact same name. So whenever in these docs it references a class such as this, account create transaction, we'll be using that exact same class in Python. So we'll be account create transaction, and we'll be setting the key, setting an initial balance for the account, and we'll be using tiny bars, because there's different denominations of Hbar. There's millibar, there's megabar, there's Hbar, and so on and so forth. I'll go through those in a little bit more detail at some point. And then you execute and you call client. So this is the client that we built in the last tutorial. And then you get the new account ID. So from the new account, you get receipt client account ID, and then you can do a system printout. So this is what we're going to do. We'll be going to working through this now, but we'll be coding it in Python. So what I do, I open up my Sublime Text. This is the project we were playing around with the other day, or in the last video, should I say. Get client.py. This is what we wrote. I'll just make that a little bit easier for you to read. So we imported OS, we've got Hedera, we've got the import client, account ID and private key, and we created this. So in a CMD or command prompt, we were then able to call this class or call client from get client, and it then allows us to work with the API. So that's the very first part of this. So what we now need to do, we need to create a new file. So new file, and we will call this save as, and we'll call this, and we'll save it in the same directory, create account.py. Okay, so let's look back at the docs. So we are going to need to import, first off the bat, we need to import client from the get client py. So from get client dot get client import client. Then we want to, from Hedera, import. Now, if we look back on the Hedera docs, it will tell us which ones to import. So, generate keys. So, private key, new account private key equal, right. So, we need to import private key. And then we also need to import account create transaction. Just paste that in there. And then it was account create transaction. Okay, so we've got those. So we've now got the right bits and pieces in this file, create account.py, so we can actually communicate with the API. So back to the docs. Step one, it says that we need to create a variable, so it'll be private key.generate, and that variable is then get public key. So we'll call a variable and then we'll call a method get public key to get the public key. So so it will create a private key, and from that instance we can get the public key. I hope that makes sense. That's what we're going to try and do in here. So if we go into this file, I'm going to create a class and I'm going to call this Hedera account, because we'll be wanting to call this in some of the other files later on in the tutorial. And what we'll do is we will go def and we'll do the dunder init, and we'll have self, and we'll have args and keyword args. Okay, so what we'll do, we will define a couple of variables here, and we'll have self, we'll have this private, and we will, if we look at the docs, it was, if we remember in the docs, it was private key generate. So we're calling the class private key and the method at generate, and that will create an instance of private key to which we can then get the public key. So self.public, what we now do is we call the private, the self.private variable we've got here, and we call the get public key method. Okay, so if we go back to the docs, so all we've done is this bit here. Okay, so this is Java. So I'm reading Java docs and trying to sort of translate it to Python. So essentially what they're doing here in Java is we're creating a variable and we're calling private key.generate, which we just did in the class, and then the public, so that in our case it's self.public, we're creating another variable and we're calling this, so we're calling self.private, and we're then calling the method get public key. So we've basically followed exactly this. It's just the difference is this is Java on the screen, and we're doing it in Python. So step two, create an account. So we've done step one. So the next one is new account. So again, look at this as they're creating a variable called new account, and they're calling this class here. So account create transaction. So we'll do that quickly. So I'll go back into docs, go back into our create account py, and we'll call this tran, and this is the account transaction. So tran now becomes the exact same as what we've got in the docs here, so it's this line here, and then they are setting a key, or set key, set initial balance, and execute client, which we'll do. Go back into, there we go. And what we'll do, we will create another variable called RESP, short for receipt. So what we'll do, we'll call tran. So this is the variable that we just created. And in the docs, it says set key. And then it's set initial balance. And then it's execute. And then they call client, right? So client is what we've already brought in from the top. So just by calling client, it creates a client based on the get client py file that we've got here. So we're adding client in there. So we're creating a variable called RESP, and we're calling tran, which is this here, setting the key. So we need to add in here self.public and set initial balance. I think we need to bring in something else actually. I think we need to bring in hbar. Let me just double check on the docs. Yeah, so they're bringing in hbar. So that's another class that we need to import quickly. So go back into here. So it's just a hbar. So in set initial balance, back on the docs, it says set initial balance. So it's hbar.from tinybars. So this will add 1,000 tinybars as the initial balance for the account we're now creating. Okay, so RESP equals tran.setKey, so we're setting the public key. Then we're setting the initial balance, which is hbar.from tinybars 1,000, so 1,000 tinybars dot execute. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So we go back to docs quickly. That's this section done. So part 3 is get the new account ID. So the new entity, account topic token file smart contract ID, is stored in the receipt, so of the transaction. You must request a receipt of the transaction to obtain the new account ID. Requesting a receipt is free of charge today. That is 21st of June 2021. So from the new account that we've just created, so in our case the variable RESP, we now need to call get receipt against it and then get the account ID from it. So let's go ahead and do that. So there we go. Just looking at my notes. So RESP. So that's why I was getting it wrong. I've got my shorthand wrong. Anyway, right, receipt equals, and it's RESP, and it's get receipt, and we're calling client. Okay, and that is it. So let's just double check we've got everything right. So from .getClient import client, from Hedera import private key, account creation, account create transaction and hbar, and then in our new class called Hedera account, we've got an dunder init function here, and we've got private key, calling generate from private key. We're creating a public self.public variable from the private variable here, calling get public key. Then we've got account create transaction into tran variable. And then from tran, we're setting the key. So this is the public key. We're setting an initial balance to the account of 1,000 tinybar, and we're executing it using the client that we've imported. And then to get the account ID, we need to call get receipt from the receipt, and we're calling get receipt and adding client. So this receipt here will now contain the account ID for the new account that we have just created. Okay, so now what we need to do, we need a way of, we'll just call this. So let's have a little function in here. So def create new account, and we'll pass in self. And what we want to do is, sorry, that's JavaScript. Right, so if we go and just create a variable called ACCID, and what we'll do, we'll call this, we'll get the receipt. So we're essentially, by calling the Hedera account class, we're creating the account, right? So then when we call the create new account, we want to get the account ID, and also, we'll go in the docs in a second, we want to get the account balance. And we'll just do a quick print. We'll return a print so we can actually see it on our CMD. So account ID, what we need to do is we need to go self.receipt and account ID, and then we go to string. And then we want to, if we go back to the docs, so essentially what we've done is, so print out to string. So what we've just done is we've just done this piece of code here. So we're calling the account ID from the new receipt that we've just created, and we're rendering it to string. So we're using toString, which is Java. And in here, in step 4, verify the new account balance. Next, you will submit a query to the Hedera test network to return the balance of the new account using the new account ID. The current account balance for the new account should be 1,000 tiny bars. Right, so we now need to, it looks like we're calling account balance query. So I need to import that from Hedera, and we're going to do this piece of code. So in Python, it would be create a variable, calling the new class that we're going to import. We need to set the account ID, which we've just saved as a new variable, and execute it with client. And then we can then render it using toString and print it using Python. So that's what we're going to do here. Go back into our Python, our py file. So we need to import, where was it? We need to import account balance query. At the top here, what I'll do, make this a little bit easier. There we go. And if we just put a comma here and close off that tuple, tidy it up a little bit. There we go. So we just brought in account balance query. So we now need to, let's call this balance, and it will be account balance query. And let's go straight from the docs rather than looking at my notes, because I haven't actually done this one yet. So it's account balance query, and it's dot set account ID, and then execute with client, right? So and execute. And the set account ID will be the new ACCID that we just created above. So that will need to be that. So account balance, right, so we're creating a variable called balance. We're calling the account balance query class from the library that we've installed. And then against that class, we're then calling the set account ID method, and we're adding the account ID that we've added above here, which is straight from the receipt variable. And then we're calling execute and adding client, which we've imported. So that's the balance. For all I know, this is not going to work, but we'll give it a go anyway. And balance text would be balance, and I'm assuming this will be toString. And then we will print ACCID and print balance text. Wonderful. I think that's it. That's all we're going to need to do. So now we need to open up our CMD and import create account, and then call a Hedera accounts class when calling a create new account. So let's give it a go and see if it actually works. So if I open up CMD, and if I cd to Hedera demo, I've got the path wrong, so it's actually dash demo. And if we work on Hedera demo, that should fire up the virtual environment. And then if we click py, I'll open up the shell, and from this will be, yeah, from what do you call this? Create account, import Hedera account. No, what did I call it? Yeah, what I did, I did the relative import. So from .get client, it just needs to be from get client, import client. So from create account, import Hedera account. And what I will do is go Hedera account, and we'll call this, and what we've got to do is create, is it create new account? I always do this, I always forget what I'm calling my methods. In it, and got to create new account, so that should work. Let's have a look, see if that'll work. I was doing something. Right, okay, what have we got? JNIUS Java execution invalid Python object for this argument. We want account ID. What have I put here then? Receipt.account ID, is that what it is? I've probably just camel case, and it should probably be, let's have a look. Right, I figured out what it was now. So if I go back into my py file, so what I had, if I had to go back, so I had on account ID, I had toString. So because of adding the toString, I'm creating a string variable where you actually need the object to pass through to the balance. So if I just remove that and pass account ID through to this account balance query, then it works. And then what I do is I add the toString when I'm rendering or printing the account ID toString. It now prints the account ID. So if I save that, if I go back into my CMD, so we'll go quit, and I'll just go back in and go py, and we will import a Hedera account, and we will create a new account. So we're calling that method create new account. It will take a second, and what it will do, it will print out the new account ID, which is 0.0.1958859, and the balance is 1000 tiny bar. So that's exactly what we were looking to do. So it actually works. So it took a little bit to get that working then, but it's because I'm working with Java and Python, and I don't code in Java, so I'm always a little bit clunky, but I'm just trying to help you as a Python developer get up and running with Hedera. Hopefully we'll have an SDK soon enough so that we can all just jump in two-footed and happy days. So that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I do hope that this was of value for you and you can use this in your project. So thanks for watching. If you have not, or this is the first time you visited Decoding, then please like the video, please add a comment and subscribe, because that would be a massive help. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.